I think it's very fashionable today to be talking the long term. We're going to do this in the long term, and but actually we've got short-term issues we need to get through to kind of get business confidence up, get business doing it again, and government's very important in that regard.
The New Zealand Business Podcast, brought to you by Gorilla Technology, your strategic and proactive IT partner.
Greetings and welcome along to the New Zealand Business Podcast. I'm your host, Paul Spain, and today we have Simon Bridges. Simon is the Chief Executive of the Auckland Business Chamber, where he plays a pivotal role in advocating for the interests of Auckland's business community. Simon also serves as Board Chair at the New Zealand Transport Agency. Before stepping into the business world, Simon had a distinguished political career where he served as leader of the opposition and held multiple ministerial portfolios when National were in government, including Minister of Transport, Minister of Energy, Minister of Economic Development. Simon's extensive experience in both governance and business make him a valuable voice in discussions about New Zealand's economic future and in offering advice and expertise to those in business and leadership. Join us as we delve into Simon's journey, his insights on the current business climate, and his vision for the future of Auckland and New Zealand's economy. The New Zealand Business Podcast is proudly brought to you by Gorilla Technology, the information technology services firm helping smaller to medium New Zealand organisations with every aspect of technology enablement and uplift, whilst minimising technology and cyber risks. All right, let's jump in. Well, welcome to the studio, Simon. It's great to be here and a great chance to delve into some of your story and some of your many insights.
Hey, great to be with you, Paul.
Well, look, usually with these chats, I do like to go, a little bit of background before we delve into it. Now, I think in your case, probably, a lot of people have got, have heard a bit of your story before, yes. But maybe we can sort of, sweep through a little bit of where you grew up and so on, and how your career kicked off.
Yeah, I'm a Westie originally, West Auckland, Te Atatu, and back then it was Tat North, now it's Te Atatu Peninsula and the houses south of all. But my father was a Baptist minister, my mum was a teacher, primary school teacher, and I'm the youngest of six, so, some would say that means I was spoiled. I would say just, well nurtured, probably, and yeah, look, good upbringing. I mean, we didn't have much money, but, big emphasis on education, and I was, without overplaying it, I was academically smart. So, school, uni, did well at that, Oxford Uni. My father sort of bullied me really into doing law. I probably would have become a left-wing political science academic if I'd had my way, but so he probably saved me, actually. So I'd probably be even more bitter and twisted now if I'd gone down that route. But so I did law. I had an older brother who'd done law and was at Russell McVeigh and then offshore. And so my father thought that was very glamorous and the right thing to do. So I did law, but actually I went the way of criminal law. I mean, initially worked at Kensington Swan here in Auckland, now Denton's, but then did Crown work. Very young, became a senior Crown counsel, which means I was doing murders and rapes and all the worst stuff. I was going to say I enjoyed that. That's not really true. I mean, I found that satisfying work, but and then trying to cut a long story short here. I was in Tauranga, and I went to Tauranga really because there's an opportunity to get in, and if I'd done Crown work in Auckland, I would have been carrying someone's bags for a long time. Whereas if you go to the provinces, you end up getting your hand on the tools or in court much quicker.
Yeah,
and that was really why I think at the time I was the youngest Crown Counsel in New Zealand, a senior Crown Counsel at least.
How old were you at that stage?
20s.
Yeah,
but had the opportunity to stand for Parliament. I mean, I'd been involved in the National Party. And it was a good time. So I was 32 when I became member of Parliament. Obviously stood against this guy called Winston, all of that. But it was good timing because if I hadn't have done it then, I think life brings you these critical moments. Even I think 2 or 3 years after, I would have just been too kind of middle class, and the money would have been too good. It would have been even harder. My wife would have stopped me, but we were just young and dumb enough where Parliament and idealistic enough that changing the world in Parliament seemed like a good idea. So that was 32, and then that was the next story that's relatively well known, I suppose, but that was the next how long was I in Parliament? 14 years. And look, I look back on that with a lot of fondness, actually. It was a great time, and even the hard times in some ways were good. I mean, I sort of say it's like a methamphetamine addiction in a way. Not that I've ever had one of those or tried methamphetamine. I haven't. There's none of that. But
we warn all listeners against
don't
it.
ever do that. But what I mean is, it's not a rational thing. But politics is it's highly addictive. Even now, when people ask you, do you regret getting out? You miss it. Sometimes I miss it. I certainly don't regret getting out objectively. I had a very satisfying and interesting and fulfilling life now, and I think it's better in a lot of regards. But I do miss the adrenaline. You know, I miss the it's Thursday evening and you've got 40 texts that come in. You know, everyone wants you all of the time. It's very, people need you. It becomes, it's not necessarily a positive energy, but it's very addictive. And so that's that. And then, you know, really decided to get out. A bunch of reasons for that. I mean, some of them family, but also just a sense, look, I'd been there a while. I could easily have done another decade. I'd probably be the finance minister, and that would be good. But I'd already been a very senior minister. I'd led my party at that time. And you know, in a sense, what you don't want to do things just because you're kind of not sure what else to do, and you know, making them stale. I think, in a way, I've always been a sucker, in that I've always got out of careers when I'm right at the point where, you know, I've reached the, if not the top, you know, pretty high level and can add a lot. Did that in law. I mean, by the time I left, I was a serious criminal lawyer. By the time I left Parliament, I was on my own estimation, I suppose, a significant nationwide senior politician. But I think, you know, I'd still be there now. I'd still be there in a few times. I'd be older, fatter, greyer. My children wouldn't know me. I'd have no money. So I'm glad to be out and really enjoying the pretty fruitful sort of existence, doing sort of several things really.
Yeah, so walk us through how did you decide? Because we'll have people listening from in all sorts of different areas where, you know, they may be at one of these sort of crux points, or they're wondering if they are at, and it's like, well, should I turn this way? Should I do that? You've obviously been through, you know, a couple of those. So how did you actually make those decisions, and how strategic were you in your decision making when you were younger versus now? Is that something that's changed a lot? I know for me, when I look back on, you know, my decision making early on in my career, you know, you'd do some things that maybe you didn't step back and spend a lot of time thinking about. What did it look like for you?
I mean, I suppose it's, you know, I was talking to someone in the last little while, we might come back to this, about, you know, economics, and you've got sort of rational man theory, and you've got sort of animal spirits. And the truth is, you require a bit of those. I mean, I think for every big decision I probably have, I'm a hopeless technology guy, so most of it's on a piece of paper with a pen or a pencil. But, you know, I probably have at all significant junctures done some kind of pros and cons, benefit cost analysis at some level. But let's recognise, in the end, what's also true for life decisions. There's an irrational kind of heart component to them. I often say, it's a little bit trite, but I think it's true, the single best decisions in my life have been big risks. Now, don't get me wrong, they've always been calculated risks. I'm not a reckless guy by and large. I don't jump off a cliff without looking. You know, I calculate the cost. But if I look back, the biggest risks in career terms, one was, you know, I can remember, and actually all of them, my mother has thought that I made the wrong decision, right? Number one, moving to Tauranga to become a Crown prosecutor. I took a pay cut. I was moving to the provinces. My flatmates at that time in Parnell, like, you know, you set up, they love you at your firm. What are you doing? It was a very good, different path, and I never regret that. Going to Parliament, I can remember my mother, I just sort of got to a point where I was about to be a partner, start to earn serious money for the first time, as opposed to being the exploited young lawyer, you know, working every hour of the day. And I was throwing that away to take what was at the time, and people in hindsight, people say, no, you're always going to win. It was a massive risk. I had to sort of quit to campaign and win the seat. And actually, the conventional wisdom at the time, I remember my law firm partners, I was going to lose. I was unknown, a nobody up against Winston Peters, the foreign minister. Well, actually, luck, fate, call it what you will, played a role. He was mired in scandal at that point in time and had a bunch of issues, and I just kind of swept past him and won the seat well. But you don't know that stuff. So it was a risk. Took that. Going to Oxford, actually, I'm jumping around, that goes backwards, but big cost, time out of my career, but, fantastic and tangible experience. Got a wife out of it. We're still married despite the naysayers who thought we wouldn't be. 3 children. And then actually finally getting out of politics. It's actually a lot to lose at one level. A lot of political figures who get out, it doesn't go that well, right? There's a handful that goes really well. And again, I remember my, wonderful late mother, she thought it was absolutely insane. Having thought it was ridiculous to get in with all the damage that comes from a political, by the end, my family thought, what are you doing? You're at the top. Okay. You're about to be, but you're sort of getting out. But I think, weigh the cost, follow your heart and what those who really love you. People give a lot of terrible advice. One of the worst pieces of advice that a bunch of dickheads will give you, and they gave me coming out of Parliament, was, you've got plenty of time, take your time, you don't need to jump into anything, you're a hot commodity. That's rubbish. Actually, your political, or your currency is only there for a time, and it's 1,000 coffees and jumping at some good opportunities that come your way quite quickly, I think. So, yeah, I think big risks that are calculated can pay off. And look, if they don't, a good question to ask is, what's the worst that can happen? It's not that bad. We live in a first world country still, just, and you'll be able to swing back from them.
So with those decisions and those calculations, when you've got people like your mother, flatmates, whoever it is along the way that's telling you, no, you've got rocks in your head, Simon. Like, how much did that talk sort of influence? And obviously you made the decisions that you've made now, but when you look back, was it that sort of planning and strategy and sort of weighing things up that was strong, or did you have a bunch of other people that were saying, hey, no, you're absolutely right on track, this is going to make all the difference?
It's a great question. I think everyone will be a bit different. I think in latter years, having been nearly married 20 years, my wife is obviously a good litmus test, because in the end, she has our best interests at heart. A lot of pals, and I've got some great friends. In the end, they may be coming from genuine concern for you, but they don't necessarily know all of the full picture and so on. So I personally think for me, I'm a reasonably strong character. I think we wouldn't overplay this with anyone, but reasonably analytical. So I think at one level you have to, having done your homework, trust yourself. And if your core kind of loved one or loved ones are also broadly in alignment on them, that's probably something, in the end with my mum, she's coming from a place of genuine concern on these things, but also, probably a bit of fearfulness from a generation gone by that's very security kind of obsessed as a generational thing. So, that's her perspective. And I say, mates, well, I think if all you do is listen to your mates, you're probably going to find yourself in a pretty suboptimal position over time.
So, you talked about bad advice about, hey, just take your time moving out of politics. So you ended up sort of taking a few things on, reasonably quickly. Walk us through.
Yeah, the truth is, I again, there's a calculated risk element here. I knew fundamentally I would be CEO of the Chamber upon retiring from Parliament. It's not as if I jumped without looking and something will turn up, right? I'm not that sort of character. I'm not going to do that. I've got a wife and 3 children, and we've got to pay our way in this world. I think what I've worked out, I think about 3 years on, and I hate to say this, and if anyone wants to offer me, $1.5 million to be CE of their firm or something, I'd be happy to entertain it. But ultimately, I'm probably not a full-time CEO of a proper business. It is just not in the end. I think I would struggle to do that day in, day out, selling the widget for 5 years. I've realised for me it's really a portfolio that I aspire to. It keeps life interesting and probably in a way it's the same things I liked about politics, that fast-paced, interesting, somewhat creative nature. So I'm CEO of the Chamber. I mean, that is my full-time day job, and if I do say so myself, in case any board members are listening, I think I add a lot of value there. And, we're in ascendancy. It's going very well. And we're supporting and helping a lot of businesses fundamentally in Auckland, but perhaps even more broadly. And then things have just kind of come along. And I don't mean to be cute about that. I mean, I've worked at it. It takes a lot of coffees and sifting through things. And at a level, to be very transparent, trading up, as things that are better come along, you think would be more creative or more remunerating. I've got two criteria really. Is it fun? By which I really mean not just fun, but interesting, stimulating, worthwhile, creating some impact. Or is it financially rewarding? I'm chair of NZTA, Waka Kotahi. I wouldn't call that fun. I wouldn't call it financially remunerating either, actually. But it is significant, nation building, and takes a fair amount of time. I'm on a company board or two and enjoy that. And then personally, I've and I think I can say, in my view of myself, I'm these days a real business person. I'm involved in a pet food company. It's a fast moving trend globally, and we're playing in some exciting niches in that, honey, seafood, and a few other bits and pieces as well. So as I say, I worked hard, fell into it a level, but a portfolio life, which I find very stimulating. If of course it's not sometimes slightly busy, and we need to kind of ensure that we I shouldn't talk in the royal we. You get told off for that in Parliament, in politics. I see the wood for the trees and so on. But I think fundamentally I like to be busy, and that's a very stimulating life for me at the moment.
Yeah, it sounds like you've got a lot on your plate. Now, tell me about these other businesses you've got involved in. You mentioned, pet food and honey and so on.
Yeah.
How have those things come about, and where do you fit in? Are you an investor, or what does that?
Yeah,
look
I mean,
like?
look, in relation to pet food, it's a really good friend who opened that up. We saw through a friend of his a great opportunity, and a fantastic businesswoman who created this high value, high nutrition set of products with natural ingredients in New Zealand. And, I suppose my value proposition in that is the ability to sort of help scale that and take that to the world with connection, throughout Asia and other parts of the, be clear, it's really small, but it's fun. And it's creative. And it also, I think, helps me in my role as Chamber CEO, in that I have real experience at a level, I wouldn't overplay it, but in real business and the issues, the problems, and so on. And so, that's probably one of the most exciting opportunities there. And again, in some of the board work I do, that those experiences from my own, where I have some skin in the game, they help me with, the work I'll do with other businesses.
And how much do you see that your political career has played into your post-political career? How tightly are those two connected?
I mean, it's an interesting one. I mean, at one level, I possibly break all the rules. Some smart characters who've gone from politics into very successful business careers have really tried to separate themselves from that life and become, ex-business person, where the political world's a long way. I'm certainly apolitical these days. I can genuinely, tell you, I'm happy to work with the government of the day to get good business outcomes. Whether that's Chris Luxon or Chris Hipkins, that's that's the way it is, and we'll have both of them at the chamber. But what is true is I still like the game of it. I still enjoy watching it, and at a level, if you take a business association that's successful, it's politics by other means. It's meeting people. It's talking publicly. It's thinking about issues and advocacy and the like. And I very much enjoy that. I think what's also true is, probably conventional wisdom is shy away from the profile of that past life and so on. But, I think what's true is we're all at a level of commodity. What are you trying to sort of be? And again, I hope it doesn't sound quite as immodest as it probably does, but, being a big fish in a small pond is probably helpful for me in a career. I mean, at the end of the day, it's what I've got, and so I have to work with that. Not everyone, but most Kiwis and most in business will know who I am. They probably have a preconceived view, but that's you've got to work with that.
Yeah, well, that's the reality. I mean, your office is just around the corner from ours, and I was down at a cafe with one of my team a while back, and he saw you there and was like, I think you obviously quite a fan.
There are
and,
some.
I felt really embarrassed because he was, a little bit over the top. He didn't come over and introduce himself or anything, but yeah. So clearly, that does carry some weight and create opportunities that others don't have.
Yeah, you've got to work with what you've got, right? And I'm as I say, we're all a commodity product at a level. What are your strengths and your weaknesses? And it's a funny old thing. I think I find it amazing. The period of time you think about, my political career. At one level, it was up and up until leader of the opposition, and then of course tough. But kept that party in the 40s until COVID. In COVID, I think we made, I say we in that case in the real sense, and that my colleagues and I made decisions were often hard, they were often before their time, very unpopular at the time, but now conventional wisdom around COVID settings, around law and order, around the economy and the like. And my only point there is it's kind of a laugh because back then, you'd probably be hard pressed to find too many who thought I was the top of the pops. But now if I did $1 for everyone said, I wish you were there, you're fantastic, we agreed with everything you said. Well, they didn't. Yeah. They clearly didn't because the polls told me they didn't. But that's the funny irony of the world we live in.
Yes, so true. Now, I'm curious, and I'm sure listeners will be fascinated too, with all the things that you've described. What does a week look like for Simon Bridges? Like, what are your days and a week look like?
Highly varied. I mean, next week, I do have NZTA board meetings for, I think, 2 or 3 days. Now, that's unusual, that long, but sort of that is that. But, if you take today, and to be fair, today is a pretty extreme day, but I started with breakfast, Valentine's Day, with David Seymour. And, what a way to start. As I said to the crowd there, 130 people or something, did you ever think you'd be waking up on Valentine's Day with both David Seymour and Simon Bridges? So, that's that. That was a great event. Straight into a meeting with the new Minister for Small Business, Chris Pink, talking to him about business issues and, giving him, I suppose, a few thoughts, and also hearing from him, where the government's at of that, and that's an important part of the advocacy of the Chamber. Into a meeting with the outgoing High Commissioner of Australia to New Zealand, Herinda Sidhu, talking kind of Australia, New Zealand, business, politics, you name it, through to a meeting with a great guy who's got a really interesting seaweed business in the Coromandel, who just wanted to kind of check in and tell me about it. He'd been on Country Calendar, a really stimulating story, through to then another ambassador who is our incoming ambassador to China for New Zealand, talking about, just that China-New Zealand business relationships, a bit of geopolitics, through to now sitting here with you. Clearly the highlight of my day, certainly the only bit that's going to live on in history, unless I've said, there's something I don't know about that I did wrong today. And then after this, a meeting with some business people around the new government investor migrant settings. The depressing thing about all of that is then there'll be a lot of emails and so on to get on top of, and I know I've got to do some other real work in terms of leading the chamber, which will probably spill over into the weekend. But I suppose what I hope you can see from that, it's varied, it's quite stimulating, And in the end, I don't want it to always be quite that heavy, but I sort of wouldn't have it any other way. I think I would, as I say, struggle sitting at a desk behind a spreadsheet, just making sure that widget costs and outgoings are less than incomings. I don't think I could do that, as I say, for 5 years.
Yeah, well, you've got to find the place that works for you, and then around that, how does your your family time sort of fit together? I'm picking you've got more time on your hands with family than when you say leader of the National Party. I imagine that was a different scenario.
Well, that's all right, and that's the question mark. If I'd say it in Parliament, I think fundamentally I would have children didn't know me. You're on a plane every day. I mean, have the great luxury. I think I'm just fundamentally Auckland based now, with the exception of a bit of international travel and the odd board meeting in Wellington, but really I don't travel. I like that a lot. And so it may not sound like a luxury to most people listening, but the luxury out of politics of waking up in your own bed, having breakfast at home, seeing your children go to school at a level, oftentimes I'm gone by then, but not always. Getting home, maybe going for a swim with them, having dinner together, watching some telly, that's fantastic. And this weekend I think there's some kind of crazy trolley cart race in the Domain not far from where we live, which we'll go and see, and some other bits and pieces. So no, it's definitely more time, and definitely enjoying it.
Yeah, that's great. Now, from all the things that you're involved in, you obviously get a pretty good view on what's happening sort of business-wise with the economy. You certainly share some of your opinions in varying ways. You recently had a piece in the Herald sharing some of your thoughts on what the government should be doing.
Yep.
But before we sort of delve into that, I'm really curious around what you're seeing in terms of how businesses are faring during this current economy, which is pretty challenging, and obviously it's sort of right across the board. We've seen people and businesses sort of impacted. But what are the things that really stand out to you, and then maybe we can delve into a little bit of your further thoughts on those that are doing well.
Well, there's so much in that, Paul, and I think I'll be the first to say that even armed with a few stats and surveys that we do, and we see from the banks and so on, everyone's got a perspective, and I'm not saying for every thing I tell you, I appreciate there'll be businesses whose experience quite different. So just get that big coverall caveat out of the way, because I think that is actually important. I mean, it's interesting in my journey at the Chamber, right? When I first came, the hot issue was no one could get staff, right? We were in that COVID period. We still had very restrictive immigration settings. It was a very different scene today. The issue was fundamentally workers, or lack of them, right? Skilled, unskilled, anyone, they wanted them. And that was, as I say, very different to a period, where we've seen those issues of cost and lack of cash flow and just tough conditions become more persuasive. I think last year in 24, there's a sense of, if we get through this, probably a pretty naive view at a level, but, the survive 25 suddenly we'll turn a corner and it's all going to be beer and roses and chocolates and wonderful and so on. And I suppose just to make the point, well, that hasn't happened. Some businesses are going well. Confidence is up a bit, but it is still really tough. So I think that is the experience. It's still a case of, the SME market as a generalisation, finding it very difficult. And if named businesses, that we've heard of are finding, paying the bills and getting through and their tax and so on difficult, that will certainly be the case, and is the case for a lot of small and medium size businesses. And I was saying to Chris Pink today, so that really then we can have a discussion about it, and what the Chamber does, and what we're hearing, and what businesses want from us and from government. But I think at a really high level, well, actually a lot of things you say at a high level, but a couple of things are, it's really what alleviates those kind of core financial day-to-day pressures now. A lot of that's around tax and cost and compliance coming from government. Yeah.
And so, do you see a way out? Because it does seem as though, if you look at the compliance side, for instance, that really gets any easier. It usually just gets harder for businesses, right? And for small businesses, you get to a perspective where actually a bunch of small businesses just don't work anymore because you need to be of certain sort of scale.
Yes.
Do you think the government's kind of got their head around how to balance these things out?
I do. I feel like this year we have turned a corner with the government. I think the second half of the year they got a bit bogged down in their own kind of stuff, and that was the point of a column I wrote at the start of this year about the number one issue being growth. I just felt the government was a bit stuck in a kind of, we're gonna focus on our own fiscal position. We're gonna really lock that down, cut costs, and so on. I broadly go along with that, right? I think I don't think this is being political. I think it's just kind of an objective look at things. The last government kind of overdid that by a long way, and that's created some long-term problems. And you can argue they needed to do some of it and all that, but they really went for the doctor. And so a correction of that is the right thing, but not the exclusion of everything else. And fundamentally, and I don't know, we might come back to him because he's such good fun. I mean, a lot of people say such bad fun, but, Donald Trump, he recognises a few big things in his administration. One of them is that the overall economy matters more than the government's core position. I mean, they have 130% debt to GDP there. Now, I'm not suggesting we want that at any level, right? But at our peak, we'll be in the 40s. And that's still not good because we're a small kind of cork bobbing on the ocean of economy. But government and business and civil society kind of needs to focus on the main game, and that's productivity and growth and investment in a negative growth environment right now. And so I look at it and I say there's a couple of broad things. I've already talked about tax and cost compliance, and they're important. But I look at it and I say, coming back to Mr. Trump, hey, as many people as listening to this podcast will have a view on Donald Trump, and I'd agree with them all on a certain day, right? He is crazy and irrational and unpredictable, and there's plenty that's not good, but he has done some good things. Early on, we see someone in administration that has stirred the animal spirits of business in America, right? And our government could do with a bit more of that. Signs this year are encouraging. They've come out, it's about growth. I would say straight after my column, by the way. I hadn't talked to them, but, read my column, read Chris Luxon's speech. They're quite similar, just saying. So, they've come out of the blocks in that. Then we've seen a succession of pro-business enabling announcements. That's good stuff. But, I think there's room to be even bolder because the circumstances of a negative growth environment justify that right now. So that's the first comment. And then I think, and I only say this in this other work I've done. Again, I was first to the party on this one. If you go and check, a lot of people are talking about Chinese tourism visas and so on. But I just, if you're looking for low-hanging fruit to get money into our Auckland economy or New Zealand economy for that matter, more people in restaurants, retails, hotels, and the beneficial kind of trickle down. I know people will quibble with that, but effective, all of that money sloshing around. Look for sectors that were much higher pre-COVID than they are post-COVID. You've got that in tourism. The rest of the world's back. Australia is, Singapore is, America is, and their tourism numbers. New Zealand isn't. You fundamentally analyse that. That's Chinese visitors. Yes, the Chinese economy's come down, but a big part of it is we've made it harder in terms of their visa process. Deal with that, and you'll have more money swashing around. Same is true in international education. This was a $5-6 billion sector pre-COVID. Now, people say it's low value and all these things. Sure. But at the end of the day, beggars can't be choosers. We've got negative growth in this economy. There's a couple of things they could do there that would flick the switch. So you can see quite clearly how that sort of could get things going. And I think it's very fashionable today to be talking the long term. We're going to do this in the long term, and but actually we've got short-term issues we need to get through to kind of stir those animal spirits, get business confidence up, get business doing it again, and government's very important in that regard.
And so when you're talking to business owners and business leaders, your chamber members, what are the sorts of things you're encouraging them to be thinking about and doing?
Oh, I mean, obviously, and you'll have people better placed than me. You get a great partner from a an accountancy firm that's working with SMEs every day, and they'll give you 10 top tips and about what can you cash flow, looking at these various other bits and pieces and some tricks, and that's all true. I mean, I think broadly what we provide for our businesses, and not just our businesses, look, our wider kind of, I hate the word stakeholders, but stakeholders database as a chamber is a big networking effect. And in these times, that's really important. It may sound a bit kind of cheesy, but actually, if you're a new migrant to New Zealand, you've set a business, even it's really clear, you need to be meeting, networking with others to kind of get your business going. So we're bringing businesses together. We're doing a bunch of top tier events to celebrate excellence, whether it's our business awards, business Hall of Fame, international summits. We provide a lot of advice and support. We do a lot, sort of internationally with businesses, taking them offshore and getting them up and out, which I think is important. The other one I just highlight is we've talked a bit about some of the columns and so on, but I think advocacy and thought leadership is quite important. Some of the work we've done some great work in infrastructure, if I do say so myself. We're doing some quite hard-hitting work in energy at the moment. It's a really significant issue for business. We need to see energy reform in New Zealand. SME energy costs is something they're crying out about, and so we're putting together a 10-point plan on that. Before I have people kind of slitting their wrists and saying, "We turn off, this is terrible, it's all depressing." All of that said, you asked me about green shoots before, and I think I should jump into that. I'm also seeing some quite exciting stuff. I'm seeing a lot more North Americans, Europeans here who do want to invest, who are much more, I think, because it's from where they're coming from. A guy I've been talking to, very high net worth European, his view, Europe is dying. He sees this as the new world going places. It's got a lot of strategic advantages. I see that from a lot of tech types out of a new world too, the Silicon Valleys and actually the east side of the US is sort of coming in here. So I see those sort of trends continuing in this kind of deeply problematic world. But we've got to step up for that. We've got to take their money and invest it and take their know-how and grow those unicorns from the SMEs and so on. But I think we can, right in the short term, though, I suppose, to wrap everything I've just been sort of rambling on to you about, we need to see government kind of, strip back some of the stuff, let business get at that. And as I say, I think this year we are starting to see that from government.
Mm-hmm. Now, what examples, you mentioned a couple, but what are the examples of, some firms, maybe you can name them, who, you've found pretty interesting in terms of how they're really, maybe, pushing forward from an export perspective or, others that that really caught your attention recently?
Gosh, I mean, some amazing businesses, right? And some of the work and advocacy we've done around Auckland and tech, try and think about Auckland as a global tech hub that's world class. Sectors like fintech, health tech, creative tech, gaming, post production stuff. We've got some awesome businesses. I think the point is, how about if we made a few more of them unicorns, right? I mean, the beneficial effect of that in terms of productivity, GDP, standards of living, our children wanting to stay here. But I'll give you one example. When I visited them, what was it? A few weeks ago, not that long ago, Arawa, listed on the ASX, grown from very small beginnings. I'm going to mash this and they'll probably, write us an email and say, "Simon, you got the facts kind of slightly wrong and it's a bit more like this." But hey, this is my truth, this postmodern world, and I'm sort of kind of right. I mean, they effectively, again, if I've got the right part of the sheep's anatomy right, but they are fundamentally taking sheep's guts, intestines, as I understand it. They are doing some fancy, but at a conceptual level, not that fancy stuff to kind of sanitize that and so on and turn it into tissue that is fit for the human body, right? And there are others doing somewhat similar, I don't think with sheep though, right? And they now have, from my memory, 80, 100 staff in the United States. They are, they are on their journey of selling this into hospitals and medical facilities, and I'm sure there are many applications for this. And some of it's like a paper strip that you wet and then you can kind of lay on. Obviously, it's done a bit better than that, and they probably wash their hands before the surgeon puts it on. But for example, one of it's a powder, right? And they sprinkle that powder on gunshot wounds, which America tragically has a big problem with. In surgical theatres, and there is just no reason at all that business couldn't be the next Fisher & Paykel Healthcare, which is now truly a multinational country that could be based anywhere. And if you want to sort of, short of us kind of taking some productivity pill that solves everything some other way, I just, what's not to like and what isn't, if you're wanting to turn things around sort of in a relatively quickly way, there's no silver bullets, but it's getting companies like that, a fair few of them, up into those really big businesses that would be transformative for Auckland. And I know I'm Auckland centric, but if it's transformative for Auckland, it's transformative for New Zealand and vice versa.
Sure. And so for that to happen, what do we need to be doing differently, whether it's, those that are, looking from an investment perspective, those that are, involved and seeing some of the innovation opportunities, but are maybe doing something slightly different at the moment. The government, I guess there's differing perspectives, but I think we take the point that makes a lot of sense to do, but how do we do it? How do we make that happen?
I mean, it's easy for me now, I'm out of politics, to kind of spout all this crap, so let's just be clear on that. I think there's two things, right? At one level, there's the real economy kind of macro and micro settings that are good for all SMEs and enabling, and not just SMEs, bigger businesses, right? And I've already fundamentally said that. I mean, I think, fundamentally that's getting out of the way of the, stopping the no culture that the Prime Minister talked about. I fully agree with that. I personally think, you just look at what's happening worldwide. It's a real trend towards tax reform and regulatory kind of red tape reform. And if we're not part of that at some level, we just get further left behind relative to other countries. And so, with due respect to our politicians, when they talk about being the next Singapore or Ireland or Copenhagen, just remember those cities and countries radically reformed their tax system. They slashed corporate rates and so on. And so, actually, unfortunately, I say unfortunately because it's nice to have the tax if you're government, but if you really want to get business going in those animal spirits and you want the next F&P healthcare, I think, or take another example. We were talking off air about ice cream and the potential for that in Asia. It's not without its tricks, but you need to do some of that stuff. Then I think in tech specifically, Google our report on, if you put an Auckland Tech Hub or Tech City, it'll come up, and we have another one coming out. We spent quite a lot of time on this stuff, but at a high level, it's just a bunch of stuff. Yes, it's the regulatory reforms, but it's also stuff like, if you're taking health tech or med tech, right where we're sitting, you and I right now are in sort of, broadly speaking, what we call Grafton, Auckland, let's say. There's a few dozen really cool health tech companies around us right now. And I think, government with council, with the private sector, and we'd be happy to play a part as a, civil society, if you like, and even chip in a few bucks. Getting them all together, agglomerating where the magic happens and they get to sort of sit together. Maybe it's at the Auckland University Innovation Precinct down there at Newmarket, because in this geographical area, you've got a med school, a university, our best hospital in New Zealand, I think probably, and those businesses. Getting all that together, that's an important part of the pieces puzzle. So I suppose I'm saying there's the big system-wide settings, but then there's actually quite clinical things government should do, like getting that and corralling that together. That's what the Tel Avivs and the Irelands have done. They've had these hubs for kind of innovation, excellence, really bringing private public sector together. We haven't been particularly good at that, I don't think. There's examples, but that's one example. Doing that around fintech, I think, would be another. I just mentioned these sectors because you probably, I'm sure you know more about fintech as a sector than I do. I'm no technician on this stuff, but that's a sector that's now worth as much or more than wine. right? I mean, I don't think most New Zealanders kind of understand that. We talk up wine a lot, and wine's fantastic, but fintech, and there's just no reason this $2-3 billion sector. It's the work I think the Tech Council's done, Tech NZ I should say has done. There's no reason it couldn't be a $5, $6, $7 billion sector. But it requires, thoughtful regulatory settings, maybe getting everyone together in some form of precinct or hub, so they can innovate, talk to each other. I mean, that's where the ideas come. That's the Silicon Valley experience. And actually, while I'm on a real roll, but you mentioned it and it's important, I think that capital piece is important. There'll be different views on this, but we probably, and that's why the government's announcements around migrant investors, Invest NZ, they still need to do overseas investment law reform, but we can get more overseas capital and that'll really help some of these businesses grow. I always think, went to Silicon Valley a bit as a minister, and have I been back since? I might have. My enduring experience meeting with sort of Andreessen Horowitz and some of these really big Silicon Valley VC and investment firms is they have more capital than good ideas. You can be a half decent idea in America and succeed because someone will throw $250 million or $1 billion at you, right? There are some phenomenal ideas here from these SMEs we've talked about, health tech and graft and fintech and other parts of Auckland that just don't get the capital, right? And so they're going to wither on the vine. And so that's another part of the puzzle.
Yeah, that's important. I guess when we look at our non-tech businesses, what are you seeing out there? Is there enough sort of leverage and utilization of technology amongst our varying sort of scales of business?
Well, again, with humility, because you know a lot more about it than me, but no. And I think that's something actually I think about, just challenge to myself at the Chamber. We're talking a big game here about technology businesses, but of course, as you and your listeners know, every business is a tech business at a level, has to be or should be. The mechanics should be a tech business at a level if they want productivity and they want to keep going. And so I feel like we could do a better job with business to wrap up, some of the SaaS products that SMEs could have, discount that for them, make it easier for them. The surveys we've done as a chamber and stats and surveys you would have seen show, as a gross generalisation, there's still a relatively poor kind of utilisation of the various kind of, technological tricks that SMEs should be using, just basic stuff, website, in the cloud, SEO, and 20 other things that they could be doing to make it easier on themselves. And it's such a cliche, but it's a cliche because it's true. Get that small, medium business owner and their staff from having to work, in the business to on the business because they have a bit more time, because they're a bit more productive, and they're able to look out.
Yeah, that's so important, and I'm sure you'd have at least as many conversations as I would on that front. But it's and particularly during time like this, where we're in a recessionary environment, where you really want to encourage a business leader, a business owner to be working more on the business, and you see them just getting pulled back into the nuts and bolts and day to day. But if you don't sort of step back, then that's very difficult. So I guess listening to podcasts, that's all part of that, isn't it?
I think so, because I think for small and medium business, obviously different profiles, right? A bigger business is just bigger, and I think as a gross generalisation, and we see it, in the offerings that the Chamber has. If our offerings are a bit kind of ethereal out there in the clouds, long term, our business friends won't turn up, because why? They're focused on the here and now, getting through to the next week, and making sure their revenue and costs kind of are both in the right place for some form of success, that they can pay their wages and so on. So it's I've got a lot of sympathy and empathy for small and medium businesses, but even if they're listening to some podcasts, some webinars, they will get some helpful stuff that hopefully elevates them from their business and gets them in more of that growth mindset that the Prime Minister's been talking about, that I've been talking about, but that we need to make reality.
with all the things that you've juggled over the years and juggled today, how have you kept yourself, productive and effective? Because it's easy to get really, really busy and maybe, not achieve what you could.
Yes.
But, there's differing techniques. Like, do you get up early in the morning? What's
Yeah.
your, what are your ways of working?
Hey, I'm not necessarily a poster child for getting it all right. I think I can be busy as opposed to productive on a bad day. But I mean, I think knowing why you're doing stuff and what's sort of behind it. So as I say, I sort of at one level, I mean, it's obviously more complex than this underneath it. But at one level, I mean, what are my criteria? Is it fun? Is it stimulating? Is it important? Or making money from it? I mean, they're valid. I mean, a lot of people tiff on that, and it's not particularly politically correct thing probably to say, but and actually if it hits both of those criteria, well, it might be really exciting and creative. And so for me, having that sense with the chamber that we've got growth, we're doing things that are valuable to businesses, we're additive to what's the scene in Auckland and what's happening, making Auckland a better place. That's very motivating. And because I'm motivated, heck, I've got a lot more time than I feel like I had in politics, but I do get up early. I'm lying to say I spring out of bed, but after the first cup of coffee, I'm pretty chipper, and it's a pleasure to me to be corresponding in the emails, thinking about new opportunities, whether it's potentially new business partners for the chamber or in other things that I'm doing, whether it's thinking about them at the moment where we're doing this thing that kind of no one else has done in some time. It's a business delegation to the EU, and really the Eastern EU, Poland, Romania, Hungary, Czech Republic, and free advertorial here. If you're listening, you want to come, just email me. We'd love to have you. It's quite hard work. At one level, it's a sort of it's a bit of a the work reward thing isn't there, but we've got a free trade agreement. I can see great opportunity. These are big economies now. Yeah, they're quite sophisticated economies, in defence and aerospace and technology and so on. And it'll be an awesome trip. So even though there's a lot of mahi with that, it's kind of worth it. And so I think people, the why, that's so sort of trite to about. But I do think if you have a sense of overriding purposefulness in what you're doing, I'm not massive on strategic documents that are 10 pages. I mean, I kind of think if you've done some of your own internal hard thinking, you'll be able to sum it up in a sentence, or even, a couple of words. I mean, in the end, with the chamber, it's in the title, Auckland Business Chamber. If it's about Auckland and making Auckland better, I was going to say great again, but that's someone else has stolen that. If it's about business, we're probably going to be into it. If it's not, if it's something else that's out there that's a good cause, probably not core to our purpose, or our byline, making it easier for business, does it sort of fit that? And so I think some of that hard thinking about why. As I say, I resist kind of talking about strategic documents and so on, because I think sometimes a lot of that's piffle, but pithy stuff that kind of focuses you and your team on why you're doing it. That's very motivating, and then everything else follows. And of course, all the rest. I mean, I'm not here to be a life coach, but I found actually sleep is important. I mean, that's kind of almost number 1, 2, and 3. I think there's about 1% of people who are superhumans who can go on sort of 4 hours consistently over time, but most of us can't. We need 7 or 8 hours, some exercise, all of that, some balance. But all of that said, within that, if you love what you're doing, you know why, and you've sort of worked out the strategy of it and the plan for it, hard work won't kill you. No, it's a pretty key part of the picture, isn't it? Yeah. Now looking at Auckland Chamber, just walk us through what are the things that you do? Why do people become members or stay members? Yeah. What are the sorts of things that you're doing on an ongoing basis? Well, thanks for asking. I mean, we're the oldest business association by quite a long way in New Zealand. We'd be 170 years old next year, 170 next year. We'd be one of the biggest. And I think in the end, it is quite a difficult thing to sum up succinctly hey, here's the 3 reasons and the Ginsu knives why you should join.
Because I guess it's different for every business as to what they can get out of it.
Smaller businesses tend to have a different profile of what they're looking for than a bigger business. So for a smaller, it's much more around the networking and events and maybe some of the benefits we provide by, getting a 2 degrees in and giving a special discount on that that's, saves you X $100 over the course of a year. For a bigger business, it might much more be around the work we're doing in energy and quality advocacy on that stuff, because they know, in truth, myself and actually others colleagues, we have good connection into government and agencies and the like. It's quite different. But I would say at a high level, networking and events. We are an events factory. I should be fatter given all the events I go to, right? I mean, I'm already overweight, but I should be even more so. It's just a lot. I mean, I'm every week and with our partner sort of organisations and they're well, and that provides a lot of, you just don't know when you're going to meet someone. It's the connection you need, or you get that advice, as you say, from the special event, the podcast, the webinar. Benefits, I've already talked about that, wrapping up, and they can be very significant for businesses, whether it's, the trade discounts at Bunnings or, 2 degrees or Noel Leemings or, through our insurance brokers, Clarity, these sort of things. And we deliberately, and some people tiff this, we keep our membership low, right? Because it's not actually the money I need from the SME or the bigger business. It's the connectivity that I want and I need. I think a bunch of support and advice, I won't bore you with that, but whether it's mentor programs or our regional business partner program or, a handful of other things where we're substantively, advising how in business. We do a lot in international in that area, right? We're starting to really move beyond some of the quite transactional stuff we do into advisors. If you're trying to break into Japan or China or ASEAN or North America, for example. And then finally, the bit that I suppose I personally, I spend time on all of them, but I, personally spend that advocacy, thought leadership piece. And, we've talked about quite a lot in transport and infrastructure. I don't do anything in that area now because I'm NZTA chair and I'm not allowed to advocate for things that I'm going to decide on. It's a sort of a basic no, I'm told. I don't know. I shouldn't be flippant about that. I take that very seriously, anyone who's listening.
Of course you do.
Technology, energy. And if I give you a bit of a tip, I mean, I think things have changed a lot in the last 3 years. At the chamber, I think we've got growth where our presence and profile and dare I say it, revenue are larger. 2 mega themes, which I think have been beneficial in total for businesses. We're really pushed into something I believe very strongly, and that is that ultimately Auckland is so different from New Zealand. It is the multicultural capital, right? So we work really hard to see Pacifica businesses, Asian businesses of all stripes, and so on our events. If you come to our event, it's a deeply multicultural affair, and I think that's important, right? And it's good for business because it's real Auckland. It's not some rarefied kind of yesteryear picture. And then the tech one, I just think it's all the stuff we've just talked about. The key for Auckland in the future is growing the size, the scale, the profitability of our tech firms properly conceived, but then also getting every business up on the tech, up the tech ladder, if you like. And we haven't done enough on that part, to be fair, but I think we're beginning to do more.
Thank you, Simon. Anything else you'd like to add before we finish up?
Hey, no, look, thanks so much for having me on. I probably need to pay you and lie down on a long leather couch for the session that you provided for me. But, real pleasure to talk with you.
Thanks for joining us on this episode of the New Zealand Business Podcast. Be sure to look up our other episodes featuring many of New Zealand's most innovative and successful founders and leaders, such as Sir Peter Beck, Sir Graham Henry, Rod Drury, Sir Stephen Tyndall, and many others. The New Zealand Business Podcast is brought to you by Gorilla Technology, the information technology services company focused on helping New Zealand's smaller to medium organisations to maximise the uplift they gain from innovative technology use whilst minimising cyber risks. If it's time for your organisation to know where it stands from a technology or cybersecurity perspective, visit gorillatechnology.com today and inquire about a technology or cybersecurity audit.
The New Zealand Business Podcast, brought to you by Gorilla Technology, your strategic and proactive IT partner.